Good afternoon, students. Officially spring break for most of you, so I hope you're getting to enjoy that. I'm glad I got to hang out with a few of y'all at Roses earlier, so that's always fun. Check your emails for the rest of the week because we're going to try and do something most of the days, uh, maybe lunch or afternoon. We'll see. We'll see. But in the meantime, like we do every Tuesday, I kind of want to come back up here and recap a little bit and remind ourselves of what we talked about on Sundays. We kicked off a new series called Silent Battles with the word silent crossed off. Can't really do that on YouTube and do a strike through, but I think you get the idea that we don't want these battles to be silent anymore. And in particular, we're talking about mental health, things like anxiety and stress, body image issues, cutting and depression and suicidal thoughts, all these things that, if we're being honest, have become more not normal part of our society, but they've been talked about a little more, and for good reason, right? Uh, the culture, the society you're growing up in, your age range struggles with stress and the things that leads to constantly. And so, what we want to do is we want to break that stigma that it can't be talked about, that it conveys weakness to struggle with these things, because it doesn't, not at all. And so, we want to talk about these things. And so, we kicked off this past Sunday with this series, and we talked about anxiety and worry. And we all have a little bit of normal anxiety, right? I think of the disciples on the boat with Jesus, and he's asleep, and the storm comes in, and they kind of wake him up. And you look at the story in Mark 4 that we talked about a little bit on Sunday, and they even asked him the question, "Don't you care that we're perishing?" Right? Like they actually asked Jesus that question, "Don't you care?" How many times does it feel like we ask him that just in our normal everyday life, right? When we struggle with normal anxiety, normal worry about different situations, uh, that's a lot of what we're saying. And Jesus responds to the disciples by saying, "Why are you so afraid?" He asked, "Do you still have no faith?" And so when it comes to normal anxiety, normal worry, normal fear, we've got to replace that fear with faith, right? We got to trust in the sovereignty of Jesus and the power, the love of Jesus, that he has everything under control. But when it comes to anxiety disorders, we don't want to presume and say that, oh, you just need to study the Bible more and pray more and everything will work out and you'll overcome this, because that's not always accurate. That your faith is what's lacking, right? We live in a broken world that's been corrupted by sin, and so sometimes we're going to struggle in ways uh, that are a bit abnormal from what our experience should be, or at least what we perceive it should be. And so sometimes it helps to go talk to a counselor or a licensed therapist, right? Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's not a sign of weakness. If anything, that's a sign of humility in saying, okay, I need help. So don't be afraid to ask for help. But in the meantime, as we talk about loving one another well and wrestling through these battles, we want to build a sense of community. We want to be there for one another, love one another, which means checking in on one another. And so I'd encourage you this week. It is kind of one of our big takeaways is the idea of checking in on those that you care about. Check in on your friends, check in on your loved ones, your family, and just ask them how they're doing and encourage them that they can tell you anything and everything, right? It's not just a, hey, how's it going as you're passing in the hallways kind of checking in. It's a checking in that says, hey, I want to hear how life's going. What's hard? What are some things we can celebrate? What are some things we can be praying about, right? And so actively checking in and caring for one another is kind of one of the big takeaways from our first week in this series. So as we keep going on, that's going to be one of the big things we do every week, and we're going to leave time for that for our group as a whole. But don't be afraid to check in. Don't be afraid to reach out if you see someone say something on social media, or if you hear them say something that kind of makes you cock the eyebrow a little bit and go, wait a minute, something's not quite right here. Don't be afraid to check in. Sometimes that's all we need to do is check in, and the other person will feel loved and welcome and open up. And sometimes they won't. That's okay. But we want to encourage opening up and make that more normalized, because we don't want to keep fighting these battles in silence. We don't want to keep hiding behind this false belief that it's a sign of weakness or we should never talk about these things. It's a private struggle. No, when one part suffers, we all suffer. We bear one another's burdens. We are there to live life together as we study the Word of God together. So, sometime this week, check in on somebody. check in on someone you care about and just make sure they're doing okay. Looking forward to seeing you the rest of the week. Hope you're having a good start to spring break, and we will see you later.